What do you do when you've just suffered your first major defeat? When the world realizes you're not invincible? When your own generals are begging you to retreat? Do you retreat and buy some time to regroup? Or do you double down? Well, Hitler chose the second option. He didn't regroup. He made a decision so catastrophic, so driven by rage, that it guaranteed Germany would lose the war. 300,000 men, one city, one order, no retreat, no matter what. This is what Hitler did when he couldn't take Moscow. There's a moment in every war where things stop going according to plan. Not all at once, not in some dramatic collapse, but quietly, almost unnoticeably. And the more you look at it, the more you realize everything after that moment was already set in motion. December 1941 is one of those moments. Just a few months earlier, Operation Barbarossa had started exactly the way Germany expected. Fast, aggressive, overwhelming. Blitzkrieg had already crushed Poland and taken down France in weeks. So the assumption was simple. The Soviet Union would fall the same way. And early on, it really did look like that was happening. German forces pushed hundreds of miles into Soviet territory, surrounding entire armies, capturing massive numbers of prisoners, and taking city after city with a kind of speed that made it feel almost inevitable. For a while, it didn't even feel like a war. It felt like momentum. But this is the part that keeps standing out. Because when an army moves that fast, when everything is working exactly as planned, you don't really think about what happens if it suddenly stops. And then it does. Right outside Moscow, the advance slows, and then comes to a complete halt. Not because the Germans decide to stop, but because they physically can't keep going. The winter hits harder than expected. Temperatures drop to around minus 30 degrees Celsius. Engines freeze, weapons jam, supply lines stretch too far to function properly, and soldiers begin to weaken without even fighting. Some collapse in the snow and never get back up. This isn't a tactical pause. This is a system breaking under pressure. And what makes it worse is that none of this is really a surprise in hindsight. Adolf Hitler had built the entire invasion on the belief that the Soviet Union would collapse quickly, not just militarily, but internally. And to be fair, there were reasons to believe that. The Red Army had struggled badly in the Winter War against Finland just 2 years earlier, and Stalin's purges had removed a huge number of experienced officers. From the outside, the Soviet system looked unstable, maybe even fragile, but it didn't collapse. Instead, it held, and then it pushed back. Fresh Soviet divisions, trained for winter conditions, begin arriving from the east after it becomes clear that Japan won't attack Siberia. And for the first time in the war, German forces aren't advancing anymore. They're being pushed backward. It's not a complete collapse, at least not yet, but it's the first real signal that this war isn't going to follow the path Germany expected. The idea of a quick victory is gone. The momentum is gone. And in a war built almost entirely on speed and pressure, losing that momentum changes everything. This is the moment where things should have changed. This is where a different decision could have been made. Pull back. Stabilize the front. Prepare for a longer war. That's what most of the German high command is thinking at the time. Because from a military perspective, the situation is still recoverable, but that's not what happens. Because the failure at Moscow doesn't just create a strategic problem, it creates a reaction. And the way that reaction unfolds is what turns this from a setback into something much worse. After Moscow, this is where things should have slowed down. Logically, this is the moment to regroup, shorten the lines, and prepare for a longer war. That's what the German high command is pushing for. Stabilize now, or risk losing control later. But that's not how Adolf Hitler sees it. He doesn't treat Moscow like a warning. He treats it like an interruption, something that can be fixed with the next move. So instead of pulling back, he shifts the entire focus south, toward the oil fields in the Caucasus. On paper, it makes sense. Germany needs oil. Without it, the war machine eventually stops. Tanks, planes, logistics, everything depends on it. But then something changes, because on the way south, There's a city, not the capital, not the most strategic target, but it carries a name that turns it into something else entirely. Battle of Stalingrad. And this is the part that's hard to ignore, because this is where the war stops being purely strategic and starts becoming personal. Hitler could have pulled back after Moscow. He could have reset, regrouped, and fought a different kind of war, but he doesn't. And the more this decision is looked at, the less it feels like strategy, and the more it starts to look like ego, a belief that pressure will fix everything. That force alone is enough. So the objective changes. It's no longer just about winning now, it's about proving something. Once the fighting reaches Stalingrad, everything changes. This isn't open ground anymore, where speed and coordination decide the outcome. It's a city dense, industrial, and already breaking apart under constant bombardment. Buildings collapse into rubble, streets turn into choke points, and every advantage the German army had in open terrain starts to disappear. And the more they destroy the city, the harder it becomes to take it. German units push forward, but progress slows to a crawl. Every block is contested, every building fought over, sometimes floor by floor, room by room. What looks like control on a map doesn't translate on the ground. The deeper they move in, the more exposed they become. And while all of this is happening inside the city, something else is happening around it. Soviet command isn't just defending anymore, it's preparing. Reinforcements are quietly positioned beyond the flanks, not to hold the line, but to reshape it. At the center of that planning is Georgy Zhukov, who understands exactly what this moment allows. So instead of pushing the Germans out, the Soviets let them come in. Then they strike. Operation Uranus hits the weaker Romanian and Hungarian units guarding the flanks. Those lines collapse fast, and within days, Soviet forces move around the city, not toward it. The German army isn't advancing anymore. It's surrounded. And at this point, there's still a way out. By the time the encirclement is complete, the situation inside Stalingrad is already critical, but it isn't hopeless yet. The German 6th Army is cut off, yes, but not destroyed. There is still a narrow window where a breakout might work. Supplies are running low, conditions are getting worse, but the army is still intact enough to move, and the commanders on the ground know it. Friedrich Paulus understands exactly what's happening. The longer they stay in place, the tighter the encirclement becomes. Soviet forces are consolidating, reinforcing, and preparing to crush what's left inside the pocket. So he does what any experienced commander would do in that situation. He asks for permission to withdraw, not as surrender, not as defeat, but as a tactical move. Pull back, regroup, preserve the army, and fight again under better conditions. It's the logical choice, the one that could still prevent disaster. But the final decision isn't made in Stalingrad. It comes from Adolf Hitler, sitting hundreds of miles away, looking at a map instead of the reality on the ground. At first, it's justified as temporary. Supplies will be flown in. Relief forces will break through. The situation can still be reversed. On paper, it sounds possible. In reality, it isn't, because the scale is too large. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers need food, ammunition, fuel, medical supplies every single day. And the German Air Force simply cannot deliver what's required. Flights are limited, weather conditions are brutal, and losses begin to mount almost immediately. The airlift fails, and once that happens, the outcome isn't uncertain anymore. Inside Stalingrad, everything begins to collapse. Food runs out. Ammunition becomes scarce. The same winter that stopped the advance toward Moscow now begins to destroy what's left of the army. Soldiers weaken. Units lose cohesion, and any chance of organized resistance starts to fade. And still, the order doesn't change. No retreat, no surrender. Hold the city. But holding the city no longer means winning. It just means staying in place while everything falls apart. Hitler could have admitted the situation had changed. He could have pulled them back when there was still time. He could have saved the army and fought another day. But he didn't. And the more this decision is looked at, the harder it is to see it as strategy. It starts to look like something else entirely: arrogance. A belief that the same force that won earlier victories would somehow fix this situation too. That pressure alone could break reality. That retreat was weakness, even when staying meant destruction. At some point, it stops being about winning the war and starts being about refusing to admit a mistake. In January 1943, Friedrich Paulus is promoted to Field Marshal. No German Field Marshal had ever surrendered before, and the message is clear: hold the line, no matter what. On February 2, 1943, the German 6th Army surrenders. What began as an offensive ends in total destruction. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers are lost, some killed in the fighting, many more captured, and only 5,000 of the 91,000 who surrendered ever made it home. It is the first major, irreversible defeat for Germany in the war. And it doesn't happen because the army was weak. It happens because it was never allowed to leave. That's the decision that changes everything. Hitler couldn't take Moscow, so he chose not to retreat. And in doing that, he lost an entire army. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more stories like this, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps more than you think. And if there's another moment in history you want covered next, let us know.